You're listening to the Getting Smarter podcast. I'm Victoria Andrews. Recently, I've been thinking about the value and importance of community and how to build it, especially when it comes to so many barriers that are continually being placed around communities and for them to not only exist, but for them to thrive. Margaret Wheatley's quote stays with me as I think about community and the need for it. There's no greater power for change than a community discovering what it cares about. And I heard that during a national equity learning program that I attended earlier this year. Fortunately, with these thoughts in mind, I reached out to two guests today, John Watson and Maui Asgedom. I'm excited for both of them to share a portion of their own journey to inclusion and why community is essential. I met both of them at the Digital Learning Annual Conference, more affectionately known as DLAC. John Watson, he's the founder and CEO of the Evergreen Education Group, who hosts DLAC, and Maui is the author of Beetles and Angels, A Boy's Remarkable Journey from a Refugee Camp to Harvard. He's a speaker, founder, and the CEO of Inner Heroes. Happy to have both of you guys here today.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
Before we start getting into the conversation, I like to have shared definitions or even hear people's definitions. So when we talk about the word community, what does that mean to both of you? John, do you want to go first?
Sure. And I'll put it in a DLAC context for this conversation. The community at DLAC, to me, is all about the fact that there are people working in education, running innovative programs, running different schools. In the digital learning world, they tend to be somewhat isolated from each other because there's still a small percentage of overall education. And I think what tends to happen in the traditional education space, your community is often defined by your neighborhood school, by your school district, by your physical community. That's not a community that exists necessarily for educators in the online learning, hybrid learning, blended learning space, or in other innovative spaces. And so they have to come together in a different type of space. And in the case of DLAC, that's around a conference for several days each year. There's other, obviously, online communities as well. But to me, it's all about creating that connection, creating that opportunity for individuals to learn from each other, to share, to be supported by each other, to tell their stories. In the early days, we talked about share your best practices and your worst practices, because I think we've all learned as much or more from our mistakes. The community, to me, has to be a safe place to do that. And I feel really good that DLAC's been able to do that, that people don't get up and do a presentation or have a discussion where it's just, hey, look at me, look at all the brilliant stuff I've done. Their stories are, let's talk about the challenges I've had. Let's talk about some of the things that I've overcome. And let's also talk about the things I haven't figured out yet. And that, to me, that kind of sharing, that kind of honesty, transparency, vulnerability are, to me, the keys to the community.
Yeah, I love that, John. And thanks for creating that for all of us at DLAC. And for me, I'll take it in a more personal direction. When I think about what community means for me with my story, just as a former refugee, where early in my life I was in a refugee camp, community just meant survival. Like, we relied on each other to get the essentials, make it through the tough things of life, and hope for better things. And then when I came to the States, connecting with all sorts of different communities that were able to inspire me, and in many cases provide many challenges. One of the things that, so it's back to school now, and one of the things I always tell my kids is, I want you to be the kids that see the other kids who are invisible. What I mean by that is, it's easy to show up at school and think, where am I going to sit today? Who are my friends going to be? Are my needs taken care of? But in our family, I'd like each of you to think about, okay, the things that I want, everyone else also wants those things around me. And yet there's a lot of people around me who could be invisible. Everyone just sees right through them like they're not there. Well, we're the ones who see those invisible people, right? And that particularly means a lot to me because I was that invisible person growing up a lot of the time. And I saw the power that I felt when people saw me. And then over time, I came to see how incredible it was for me to push myself and challenge myself to see everybody. And I like to think of DLAC and this leadership, part of its leadership is making sure we all see each other and connect with each other, and don't just connect with the people that are comfortable for us or that are like us or teach in the same kind of districts as us, but that we're able to stretch and grow and come together and do something really cool and innovative for everybody. And then we bring that same lens to the students. So we're asking ourselves, how am I going to push myself to see those students that are invisible to me? Maybe I have never really taken time to connect with those kind of students. And I think there's tremendous power that we have to see all kids, all educators, and that excites me greatly.
If it's okay for me to add, There's a story that you told in your book, Maui, that I thought was really remarkable. You were describing talking with some high school students who are in a very difficult situation, might have been juvenile detention, and you were telling your story about your journey and including being in a refugee camp. And I hope I'm getting this story right. One of the students said something to you like, it was really hard, but you had your family and I don't have that. And as I remember the story, he was saying, you had something there that was really powerful for you. And I wish I had that. And he was talking more about family, but in a sense, your family is your first community, right? And so what I see here, and it touches on that story in your book, and it touches on what you're talking about with students feeling invisible. Everybody feels more powerful when they feel heard, when they feel lifted up, and they have the ability to do incredible things. And the flip side is when they don't feel heard, when they don't feel supported, when they don't feel all these things, their tendency is to go into their shell and not do those things. And you can think about the work that you've done, Maui, to bring individual students out in that way. And that extends all the way to the work we're trying to do in different learning environments.
Yeah, and John, the thing that shocked me about that story, which is one of my favorites, is so all these kids in this detention center had read my book, and this kid says, "I would switch places with you because you had community in the refugee camp, and here I've grown up without community, and that's why I'm here." And it helped me understand that greatest poverty is a poverty of relationship, or a poverty of community, and that's what you're talking about, John. Like making sure that people don't feel like that in places you've been entrusted to lead, right? And with DLAC and across our entire education system, that we can connect. We don't have to live in these impoverished islands by ourselves. We can see each other, connect with each other, help each other, and that's really inspiring.
And it's in the digital learning space. People who are outside of our space will sometimes have this misconception that an online course, an online school is built with the idea that students will be isolated because they'll be learning themselves. And nothing could be farther from the truth. There are certainly students who do very well learning on their own, but that is not the majority of students. And so that word you used, Maui, relationships are at the center of every educational experience, whether it's online, hybrid, blended, mainstream, traditional, et cetera. What we find in the online learning space is that if you can be intentional about those relationships, the digital learning space actually creates the opportunity for new and stronger relationships. And we try to reflect that in DLAC. We try to reflect that in the relationships and the colleagues that we have in all these things that we're doing, because it's the best work of the educators that we are working with.
And you guys do an excellent job of uplifting that work too, John. I want to go back to some of the things that you hit on, John, mentioning just how valuable relationships are, especially like you said, when you think about learning environments that are online or that are hybrid, the opportunity to work in a silo is right there. Like it's so easy for that teacher to feel isolated, for that group of students to feel isolated. And that's the power of DLAC, is that you guys bring people together, not just once a year, but also statewide, or those that are educators of elementary age students, or those that are working with students that are in secondary classes, and or those that are the micro school and homeschool, and those everybody's able to build and find their own sense of community. And what you mentioned, Maui, that just really stuck out with me was just I think you said it was the poverty of relationships, like having that even mindset of, even though I'm in a group of people, I can still feel isolated and still feel without and not connected. And again, that's one of the beautiful things of being and having attended DLAC was that you got to see it firsthand. I got to witness it. And in order to foster it, I think that you guys, or I think DLAC did such a great job with pieces that are often overlooked at conferences, especially for adult learning. We talked about this, John, the other day. Some of the best practices that we do with young people, we don't do that for adults and for adult learning. It's a fostering, which blows my mind. So it's okay. Nobody wants to necessarily be the sage on the stage or sit in a place for 60 minutes, but then you go to a conference and it's just stacked like that. But one of the first things I noticed when I attended DLAC was the flexibility, the autonomy, and the creativity of the schedule. There might be a session that's 12 minutes long or another workshop that allows more hands-on approach that is 33 minutes long. And so initially it's frustrating because if you're an outsider coming into that space, you're like, this is whack. I don't understand. Why is this one session's ending? And but once you get to understand the value and the power of that, you appreciate it, or at least I did appreciate it. And I know that's not easy to do. Can you share a little bit more, John, about some of the intentionality in regards to the scheduling and how that supports community and inclusion too?
You touched on the idea that the educators who come to DLAC are dedicated to finding new ways for students to learn and to support students. And Maui is a perfect example of having integrated these ideas into Maui Learning and some of the other work that he's done. And then, just as you said, Victoria, so many education conferences, even others that are dedicated to working with students in different ways, their expectation defaults to you're going to be in a lecture hall for an hour and somebody's going to talk at you for 55 minutes. And the interaction and networking comes because in the last 5 minutes, that presenter will say, does anybody? So we set out to create a more interactive place where people would be comfortable sharing and discussing. And it's also quite interesting because you think about there's so many movements, there's such energy behind the idea that school structures don't work well for so many students. And yet there's these forces that we know that continue to push public schools in particular back in the direction of being very traditional through bell schedules and semester schedules and things like that. And those forces are things like funding models and accountability models and how teachers are trained in pre-service programs. So there's all these pieces. Well, the same thing actually exists in the conference space, because once you start to have smaller sessions, shorter sessions, people moving around, just like you said, Victoria, the first people who show up feel like, wait, what's going on here? I thought I was just going to go to 3 different lectures today and then I'm good. And it's like, no, actually, we need you to engage a little bit more, which is actually what happens in online and blended and hybrid schools as well. They're asking for more out of their students, not to just sit there, and
Mhm.
they ask and they get more out of their students in so many cases.
It stands out. If you haven't had a chance to attend a DLAC, you should definitely do it. If for nothing else, if you run the master schedule at your school, it is a masterclass in how to create a very interactive and inclusive schedule. And I know that you guys made some really great strides in making it very inclusive. And and we've talked about this too, John, how it's a path. It's not, oh, we landed at inclusivity and we're good to go. Check it off. Now let's go to the next strategic bullet in our strategic plan. But I want to hear from both Maui and you about the different challenges and barriers to making DLAC more inclusive and some of the ways that you guys have worked around it.
Our starting point is recognizing that DLAC was not nearly as diverse as we wanted it to be, especially in the early years. And by the way, and it continues to be that way. And I want to be very careful that we don't sound like we're taking a victory lap of, hey, we got diversity inclusion solved. Not even close. Even Victoria, we were talking at first, I said, I don't want to make it sound like we're spiking the football here. We're not even close to the 50-yard line. And I also don't want to sound like we're making an excuse around what I'm about to say, but we recognize that education technology conferences are not as diverse as education. Education is not as diverse as society, especially when you think about younger generations, more diverse than older generations. And so we recognize that we're taking on a large scale societal systemic challenge here. And we've been looking for ways to both increase diversity and really focused on inclusion. What does that mean? How do we make everybody feel more comfortable? And getting involved with Maui was so valuable because Maui had such concrete ideas about things that we could be doing. And I did feel like there tended to be these discussions at a very general level of, hey, here's some things you can do. And maybe you can give out these books and talk about these papers and that sort of thing. And I was just like, talk to these people, get these people to DLAC. They're going to spread the word. And for us, that means supporting them and being there and making sure that we are giving them opportunities for speaking spots and things like that. And I think that's part of the right path. And now you were the one giving me this fantastic advice. What's your take on it?
I gave a keynote at Florida Virtual School to their staff of about 2,000 people, let's say in 2010. I became really good friends with Julie Young. She helped me launch our first leadership course online. And I was shocked to see the impact you could have online. There's even something like social emotional learning. People think you have to be in a room to help develop those skills. We're able to establish data very quickly that you could transform kids' lives by using online, plus all the community building things you were talking about, John, to create really rich experiences. So then they recommended to me actually, hey, why don't you start going to these conferences, to your conference, John? And I went for the first time, and I got a booth, and I was a vendor there. And one of the things I immediately saw was I was the only Black person there who had a booth. So we have all these booths. And then I also didn't see a lot of women entrepreneurs who had booths. And it was all the stereotypes of tech right in front of my eyes, right? It was just right there. And then the thing that really motivated me to do something about it was over the next 4 years, as I became a part of the community, my company grew over 1,000%. Like we kicked some major butt. We went from having zero, we went from having 2% of our sales online to, but when I sold the company to ACT, which was a life-changing thing for my family, like over 95% of our sales were digital. So for me, there was an issue that Black entrepreneurs, Hispanic entrepreneurs, women are not being given this opportunity to create companies, to be a part of this ecosystem. And then we're also not getting an opportunity to have impact. At one point, you used to have a report, John, called Keeping Pace, which would report all the online enrollments. I calculated at one point that my company had 10% of all online completions that year. That not just that's included with like math. So here I am, because I became a part of this world that you helped create, John. I'm impacting kids all over the world. I'm making a lot of money. I'm like, why are we limiting this to a certain type of people who know about it or who feel comfortable there? So that was a
Yeah.
big part of my motivation was, and then the other part, of course, is you want to be in there helping to shape and lead. I would give presentations. Like I gave one on how to support educators and how to help educators unlock their best in the digital world. So hundreds of people there had a great time, was very interactive. So I could help shape the field. But we don't want to deny the opportunity to people of all backgrounds, not to be participants, but to help lead and innovate and shape. And yet we know that if we just sit there and do nothing, nothing will change. So in our
Yes.
leadership courses, I always talk to students about the power of agency. And we have a simple metaphor for it. We say, hit your turbo button. Everyone has a turbo button in their heart, and you got to be that turbo and go do something. So when I sat with John, I told him all this, and he was so receptive. I give him a lot of credit. He was like, this is something that's very important to me. I want to make sure people of all backgrounds have massive opportunity to be a part of the community. They're vendors like Maui to generate impact, to build companies. They're educators to be inspired. So we worked out ideas to ensure that the presenters, not just the attendees, but the presenters on all parts of the ecosystem were represented in a diverse way. And I think part of the solve that we came to, John, which is really cool, was we focused on alliances. Let's build in some of these other groups. There's a group called Innovation for Equity, which I was a part of. I introduced you to executive director. Bam, just by that, we had 6 or 7 leaders show up. And then
Yeah.
the ball gets rolling. People hear about it. You feel like you're not the only one. And then I
Yeah.
start to get more excited about it. And then it takes on a life of its own. So I would say for me, the biggest drivers are wanting to share the opportunity with others. I view it as a massive opportunity. And
Hmm.
one thing I'm really proud of, for example, is in the last year, there were 2 women entrepreneurs after I sold my company that I personally mentored, who were, one of them was a founder, one of them was a co-founder, who both sold their companies as I did. And they were both Caucasians. It's not that it has to be a Black thing or white thing or Hispanic
Yeah.
thing, but I saw that I do look at it. I'm like, okay, I've gotten to know this woman who's running this company. I'm gonna look out for her extra. Okay. I'm gonna look out for, and that's because I'm a part of the community. And John, you don't even know these things are happening in the background, but we're able, once we're in the room, to support each other and help each other grow and prosper. And I guess that's really critical for me and my involvement to make sure that people can access the opportunity.
I love how you're such a great steward over that, Maui. And you mentioned you thanked John in that and you named that. And there were people that named you, they were like, I wouldn't have been here if Maui didn't tell me about this. And when I went to DLAC, and there was a whole group from, I think, Orange County, Florida, and online virtual. Oh my gosh, they were phenomenal. We had, some might say, too much time, too much of a good time, but it's DLAC, so there's no such thing.
Right?
And they were like, we didn't even know this existed. That school had been around forever. And in talking to them, I met them. I'm from Texas, and we had so many overlaps and connections. They attended the session I led or was able to participate with Danny Martin. And then in that, they were like, oh, we are already planning our session for next year. So it's just that trickle effect, that ripple effect of community. And I still keep in contact with that whole virtual team. And we're already, of course, excited to meet in Atlanta next year. When you're in community and you have those people that are of shared mindsets and shared values, people are just stewarding their social capital well, their energy well, their turbo button well. So John is like, I got to connect with Maui. I have to engage these various stakeholders, and it's not just put the whole team on my back, because you can't do it, and that you already tried and had not have met everything, all the metrics of success. And I love that you, both of you guys, have just mentioned just making sure that whatever it is that you can do within your own power to continue to make sure that it is inclusive and very intentional. I can't even stress that enough. I just, the level of intentionality that I noticed of working towards inclusivity and community at DLAC.
I was gonna say the greatest proof of that is the last two DLACs I've gone to, I don't have any products to sell in online education. I don't have any business really there. It's not really part of what I just go there because I like the people. I like to see my friend, I like to see
Yeah.
Brandy. And I think that's where you know you've succeeded, John, is when you've built community where people want to see each other, they value each other. They're not even there. There's a lot of people showing up there because that's their family, right? And that's
Yes.
where you feel.
Yeah.
And it's a professional home. And I hope that makes you feel proud, John, because
Yes.
I'm paying it my own way, doing all this. I'm not selling anything. I'm just there because I like it. And I like the people
Yeah.
that I want to be part of it. Like, I don't have a
Yes.
product or anything. I don't have an online product or digital product. To me, that's a success for you, John, and what you're building.
It is undoubtedly a success. I do want to mention it's not even close to me or just me. It's not, and it's not even just our team. So part of the element, and people like Allison Powell, do like program chair, is front and center in this work. There's a whole team behind this. Even beyond that, a community built itself, and we facilitated that. We provided the place, the networking, the platform, but we've got, Allison has built an official program committee that has 150 people on it. These are 150 people who are volunteering their time to make this community what it is.
Yeah.
And that is the way this really works. The other thing, I want to build on something that Maui, you said about being in the room, right? And to me, community, the kind of community that we want to build, is everybody's in the room. Or at the very least, everybody has the opportunity to be in the room. Because what's maybe one of those feelings that's really bad, you both referenced earlier, it's like you're feeling invisible, and you might feel invisible in a crowded room. You know what else feels really bad? When there's this thing going on in this room and you realize nobody asked me, nobody invited me into that room. That sounds like fun. That sounds important. That sounds energetic. Why am I not in there? We want everybody in there. And that is part of it as well. It's about being inclusive in a sense of you're trying to create better outcomes for schools and students. We want you there, and we want you to be part of the conversation and part of this community.
I think that's fantastic. I think it is, a lot of people volunteer because they feel the mission, they feel connected, they understand why it's important to do this for each other, for students, and it's just fun, right? Victoria, the one thing I also wanted to share with you, with your passion that you've been sharing with me about professional learning and making sure, one of the things that I discovered after visiting over 1,000 schools and being all over the country is that the best way to help students, the single best way to help students, is to help the adults in their lives. The adults are the ultimate leverage point, which is why when I first started speaking, I spoke only to students. Now all of my professional development is for adults. We create the oxygen, we create the beliefs. Even when John says something like, we can create amazing relationships online, that's a belief about what's possible. It's coming from an adult that then connects with other adults and builds helps build the ecosystem of what's possible. You could easily just say, it's not possible. We're just going to do a click and run, like online kind of stuff, whatever. It's just the vision that we have and the way we build each other up is so critical. So I do think that the focus you have on professional learning and making it amazing is critical for our students and our entire education system.
And when you, as an adult, or at least let me speak for me, when I experience like powerful learning experiences, I want to replicate that. I don't want to just hold it and bottle it up. The number of times I'm like, if you're looking for an interactive learning environment, you should consider DLAC.
Yeah.
And even if you have no interest in digital learning, just go so you can experience interactive learning and you can experience it in a way that could even, like you said, it can push you as an educator in whatever space that you're in, whether it is traditional, micro school, charter school, private school, whatever the case may be. Like you said, that lever, Maui, is the adult in that space. But if I'm an adult that hasn't experienced that, then sometimes it's going to be even more challenging for me to share that or to create that or reimagine what that space can look like for the young people that I work with every day. So that's my push for just go and try something a little bit different because you don't know how that's going to impact just not you. Again, it's that ripple effect and all of the young people that we are in community with every day. So I want to, as we begin to wrap up and close, I want to just encourage those that are listening to really examine their own sense of community, their own definition and what it looks like. How can they push it, the bounds of it? How can they stretch it? Where's the tension? Who can they be in collaboration with? John and Maui, who are the people that you can tap or the people that you have not tapped yet that can really enhance and bring a whole nother level of just joy, a whole nother level of thought, a whole nother perspective to make the environment even more richer and robust. To really do that, because you're robbing yourself, you're robbing the people that you're in community with. And I really just encourage people to do that. Any other parting words, Maui and John?
One thing I believe really strongly about our overall community is that the power of what so many educators know, it's incredibly strong. And so many educators, and I'm using that term broadly, I'm including teachers and counselors and school leaders, many of them don't know how much they know. They don't understand the value of what they're bringing because they're living it. And because they're living it, especially in a field as new as digital learning, they understand things very deeply and they always have things to share. And I find myself saying to teachers, counselors, school leaders all the time, please come to DLAC and please present. A presentation might be leading a discussion. Share. You have so much to share. And it's oftentimes the people who don't think they have a lot. They may be very quiet. They may say, I mostly want to listen. We want you there. We want you sharing. You have so much to contribute to be part of this community.
Yeah, I always thought that was one of the most cool parts when I discovered the community, John, was it is a community of innovation and learning. There's so many parts of education that are kind of like dying, like the old textbook industry, like people are like, and it's basically that complete opposite of that, right?
Yeah.
There's innovation. There's so many things yet to discover. We're learning from each other. And I think that also creates an openness and a humility in everybody too, which is a lot of fun. I would say that's probably one of the things I enjoyed the most about it, being an entrepreneur in this space, is just you're helping to create things. You're helping to innovate. You're helping to shape the future. That's fun. That's a lot of fun. It's cool, right? You feel that energy in the room. And I think that's one of the reasons the conference has continued to grow so much in recent years, John. And look forward to seeing you at the next one, of course. Both of you, right?
Yes, absolutely. We're in community with
That's
each other.
right.
We have to. So thank you guys so much for joining me. Thank you for participating in this conversation as we just continue to have or continue to reflect on the power of inclusivity, the intentionality that has to be behind it, the challenges and the opportunities that are available with it. So thank you. You guys have a great day.
Thank you, Victoria. I
Thank you
appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Getting Smart podcast today. We want this podcast to be actionable, insightful, and a great way to learn about what's next in learning. In order to stay on the cutting edge, we need people in the field to tell us what they're hearing, what they're wanting, and what they're needing to learn more about. Got a topic or a guest in mind? send your recommendations to me, Mason at gettingsmart.com. And if you like what you're hearing, don't forget to leave a review in Apple Podcasts or subscribe wherever you listen. Feel free to share the podcast on social media using the hashtag GSPodcasts. Thanks so much.